Welcome to the Live Up podcast, where we revisit the movies from our youth to see if they live up. I am Jess Latterman.
And I'm Amanda Treat, and I am very excited about the movie we're about to review for our first ever episode. We are reviewing Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Yeah. So since this is our first podcast, we're just explain a little bit about how this will go. So we'll do a quick intro about the movie in question, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Then we're going to discuss and then rate or score on a scale of 1 to 10 whether the movie lives up to us now as adults, if it could live up to kids now, or at least the movie's intended audience, and whether we found something new to like about it or relate to. So after all of that, both of us will give the movie a final yay or nay of whether it lives up or not. And we've rewatched the movie, but before we recorded, but we haven't really talked about it to each other. So there might be some surprises in there for how we feel. So should we do it?
Let's do it.
All right. So you already started, Amanda. So tell us a little bit about the movie in question, your personal history with it, what you expected before rewatching it.
All right. So this is 1988's Who Framed Roger Rabbit by Robert Zemeckis as director. And I saw this movie in the theater with my dad and my little sister. And I think at the time it was being advertised heavily as a really zany kids movie. But I remember even when we went to go see it, that it was a little bit dark. And that,
like the movie theater dark, or
everything that could be dark was a little dark. We then proceeded to receive this movie on VHS cassette for Christmas that year. Not one copy, but my sister and I each got a copy. So we had 2 VHS cassettes.
Why did you need 2 VHS tapes? Did you have 2 VCRs in your house?
I think Santa didn't coordinate with himself, perhaps.
Got a rogue elf.
Oh, yeah. Give him 2. So we ended up watching this movie as kids probably dozens and dozens of times. It could have been 100 times. So it was a lot. And then just quickly to mention, the last time I saw this was actually giving a quick shout out to the Coolidge Corner Theater in Brookline, Massachusetts, where before they did the big showing, it was their Monday night science on film flick, and they introduced Gary K. Wolfe, who is the writer of the book that this movie is based on, was in the audience with us because he lived in Brookline, Massachusetts. But probably still lives there. I shouldn't make it past tense, but this was 10 years ago, so I'm not quite sure. It was everyone's clapping and giving him a standing ovation for creating this character and everything. Really nice, really touching, but same movie. So
I don't even know
years. Was so happy we got to watch this again.
Yeah.
What about you?
All right. Well, I'll give a little bit of my history. I think I also saw it in the theater with my family, and I just remember being totally terrified by it, like as a kid. I mean, and then I grew to love it. Santa did not give me 2 VHS tapes, but I'm pretty sure we had 1. And I can't remember whether this was a movie that was on all the time or whether we just watched it via VHS tape all the time. But I think I'm in the dozens or hundreds category at this point. So it was a lot. It was a lot. And I will say, I guess going in, so I then rewatched it for this podcast with my family. So with my wife, my 10-year-old, my 5-year-old, and I really had no idea. It had been so long. It'd probably been like 30 years since I'd seen it that I had really no idea what to expect. So, I went in totally cold. Well, totally cold after watching it 100 times as a kid, but totally cold in that way. So I think it would be helpful here. I'm just going to give, hopefully for folks listening, you kind of know what we're talking about with this movie, but I'll give a quick reminder if it's also been 30 years for you. So Who Framed Roger Rabbit? It's set in a fictional Hollywood from the 40s where cartoon characters or toons are alive and they intermingle with real people. Roger Rabbit is a toon who is framed for murder, and a somewhat drunk all the time detective, Eddie Valiant, gets roped into helping him clear his name. So that's like the basic overview in case you've literally forgotten everything, but you're still with us here. So, Treat, before we dive in, anything about the movie's reception or other fun facts that you know about the movie? We don't have to go all the way
Digging
in.
all the way back to 1988.
Dig it all the way back, guys.
I'm going from memory here because I have a very clear memory of the summer when this came out. And I remember it being promoted as this unbelievable collaboration between Disney and Warner Brothers.
Do you remember that? You're so aware.
Do.
I no idea.
They made this TV special about it that we taped and had that on VHS cassette as well. But they were so excited that, okay, Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny have a scene together, and Daffy Duck and Donald Duck are going to be playing the piano together. And, you know, I think this was appearing all over McDonald's Happy Meals, and there were little figures you could buy, and there was all such, like, the promotion on it was crazy, but they were promoting it as a Disney kids movie. And I think our expectation was, okay, this is going to be like funny. It's going to be for children. And yeah, I think they promoted it in a very, not strange way, but they promoted it in the wrong way, because that's not what this movie is.
Well, it could be, but
it wasn't.
I have no memory of the promotion at all. So at the ripe age of 8, or 9, I had no idea. So
yeah, no, I
you for
even remember they were so excited because it was Mel Blanc was doing all the voices. He was still alive. He was doing the voices for all the Warner Brothers characters. So like he's the original Bugs Bunny voice and Daffy Duck and Porky Pig. And they got May Castell, who was the original Betty Boop voice. She was like 120 years old at the time, but they had her come in and do that voice again. And yeah, so I just remember it was like considered to be this huge effort just to get all these players involved, and like, you know, we were agreeing to make this movie. So it seemed, I think the hype for the movie was huge.
Yeah.
And that I think some of the response to it at the time was kind of like, oh, okay, like, you know, it was good, but like I don't know what we were expecting, but we were expecting like fireworks and
fireworks.
Yeah, best picture. You know, we were expecting something wild, and yeah, it was good.
So you clearly have a much better memory than me. I was like, cool, I get to eat popcorn, I think, when I go to the movies. But so just yeah, so I don't remember any of the promotion, but I was actually surprised. So it was the second highest grossing movie that year at $351 million, which is pretty respectable for the times.
1988, yeah.
Yeah. And it won 3 Academy Awards for film editing, sound effects editing, and best visual effects, which, like, I mean, we could talk, I'm sure we're going to get to this later. We could talk about like whether that lives up, but I think at the time, obviously, it was considered like totally revolutionary.
Yeah.
And, you know, I did look up the critics stuff. So, you know, it's hard because back in the ye olden days of 1988, it's not like everyone's review is online. But, you know, I did look up our favorite, I think, Roger Ebert, rest in peace. And so, you know, he gave it a rave review. You know, it was, so I think that like a rave review from a high-end critic sort of makes the target more adult than kid, which we could talk about. But I do want to read one quote before we head in. But so, okay, so there's a quote from the review, which was like a rave review from Roger Ebert, who, for the people who are really young listening, like he was like kind of a BFD of like movie reviewers. He's no longer with us.
2 reviewers, then they were the only ones who counted. Just the 2.
Yep, they were the only ones. All he wanted is a thumbs up from him. But he said, I have a sneaky hunch that adults will appreciate it even more than kids, because they'll have a better appreciation of how difficult it was to make and how effortlessly it succeeds. So you know, that's pretty good.
I agree with that. I do agree with that.
Yeah, and that's, you know, he also had all sorts of other rave things to say, but I thought that would be a good transition because, you know, it was for adults and for kids, but does it live up as for adults? So I think a good transition to our first section for does Who Framed Roger Rabbit live up to us as adults? So we're going to just go back and forth, not scene by scene, but just scenes that kind of jump out to us as whether they live up or don't, as we've rewatched it with our spouses and family. So do you want to start?
Sure. I think right off the bat, it starts with this slinky sort of detective music that they have playing. The soundtrack is a noir, you know, it's not a zany kids movie. It almost immediately cuts into that fake 5 minutes of Roger Rabbit filming the movie with Baby Herman, which is
Yeah.
just slapstick, crazy, you know, it's an old, you know, like Tom and Jerry style cartoon, which is, I remember as a kid, that part was fantastic. And the second it was over, it was like, wait, like that was setting a pace. But really, if you listen to the first few notes of music, like that's them setting the pace right there. Like this is about to be a noir, not a slapstick.
Mm.
You go in, you go through that scene of Roger trying to babysit Baby Herman, and there's, you know, knives flying and irons hitting him in the head and Tweety birds and all kinds of zany stuff. And it's fun. It's misleading, of course, because they're getting you right into this world where the cartoons are walking among humans and are actually tangible beings that you can grab and pick up and move around. And I think, yeah, it was kind of, from my kid point of view, it was a misleading first 5 minutes because, yeah, I had a lot of fun with that as a kid. As an adult, I remember, okay, this is going into what's about to become a very dark movie.
Did you still like it though? Like what would like I always think slapstick is really hard as an adult to get right.
Yeah.
Like for an adult audience to get right. So you know,
Well, it was fine. I mean, like,
I thought it was actually like better than I expected.
okay.
I have to say I totally forgot about that scene when I first started watching, but my 5-year-old got a kick out of it. So we can get to
Yeah.
that later. But I thought as far as slapstick goes, like as an adult, I feel like I looked at it as like it was a nice like sort of wink and a nod to what slapstick is. I mean, it had fucking everything, like knives,
Yeah.
seeing
It's
stars, like
nostalgia
yeah,
for those Tex Avery cartoons, the Tom and Jerry, and, you
yeah.
know, watching cartoons hurt each other incredibly because they're not really getting hurt. Like, and it's funny. It's very funny. So yeah, I thought that part was, it helped. That part lived up
That part lived up.
for its
Any
cartoonishness.
yeah. Any other scenes that come out? I mean, I have kind of a list here, but you know, anything else come to mind for
I've got
something?
one that I remember as a kid feeling like it was an adult joke. At the very end, we're going from the start all the way to the end here. They have Eddie Valiant and they have Jessica Rabbit pinned up, and you know they've got a gun pointed at them, and they say, "Okay, frisk Eddie Valiant, and then frisk Jessica Rabbit." And one of the weasels sticks his hand down her dress and gets hit with like a bear trap. And
Or a booby trap.
Eddie turns to her and goes, "Nice booby trap." She just kind of gives that head nod. I saw that as an adult, and I turned to my husband and was like, "Is that still funny?" And we were both like, "Yeah, that's still funny."
Oh my god,
Like,
I
so we
totally
both
agree.
thought that was still,
I totally thought
it's
that
still
was still funny
slapstick,
too.
silly stupidness. But yeah, that was still made me laugh. So
No, that's so funny you say that because I feel like that was still good.
yeah.
The scene that I was most worried about not living up
Hmm.
was, especially watching with my kids, I guess, was the club scene
Oh, the ink
where
and paint club. Yeah.
yeah, so just to refresh folks' memories, like this is you know, Detective Eddie Valiant, he gets the job and the job is to photograph
Jessica and
yeah,
Marvin Acme doing
and
whatever they're about to do.
whatever they're about to do, kids, whether you know what they're about to do. Um, and I was kind of like, okay, I remember my kid memory of the scene. I was like, is this going to hold up or is this going to be absolutely terrible? And you know, even from the beginning, like, you know, basically Eddie Valiant walks into this like seedy street, side street, and there's a big gorilla
Hmm.
who's a bouncer. And I actually have to say, like I remember this now as an adult that like for the rest of my teenage life, I thought that's how adults went out. They go
That's
down
how
seedy
bars work.
alleys. Yeah, and like a giant person like is the bouncer. And if you have a fake ID, like he's gonna like F you up. But
We'll throw you in the trash cans.
he's throwing you in the just throwing in the trash cans, just like he does to Eddie Valiant at the end. So I was worried about that one the most. But and then, you know, Eddie Valiant goes in and he's like, okay, it's like now it's like this like swanky 40s club. And I kind of thought it was good. Like the atmosphere was
Yeah.
good. And then I was like, oh no, Betty Boop, I forget Betty Boop. And she shows up. But I have to say, so Betty Boop comes in and she, starts complaining to Eddie Valiant about how she can't find work anymore because she's a black and white character versus in color. And I have to say, like, I was thinking like, oh my God, this is like commentary from 1988 about ageism in Hollywood. And I was kind of like, okay, I'm with it.
A little bit,
But
yeah.
maybe. And I thought that, Acme was like a weirdo squirting
Oh,
like disappearing ink.
what is his fetish? Like,
Right. But the thing is that it feels like an innocent fetish. Like, I thought he was going to be like creep to the max, but I'm just like, he's just sort of like special. I don't know. He didn't creep me out as much.
okay,
I didn't
that's
find him
good.
threatening. But anyway, so I was like, okay, also looking at how my kids are going to react like once the big Jessica Rabbit getting on stage to do her song. And I have to say, it lived. I think
Yeah.
she's still sexy. And I know she's a cartoon and that's weird to say, but it totally worked for me.
No, my husband popped into the room just as that scene came on, and his comment was, "Enjoy your pubescent awakenings to this scene." And then he walked out.
Okay, Amanda's husband, I'm really glad I know this about you.
I think he's speaking for an entire generation though.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I thought I was like, I would put that scene in the category of living up, in that like I think it was just done well. Like and it didn't have as much cringe. I was like, I'm gonna cringe through this whole scene. And I didn't
No,
cringe.
it's beautifully made. Like I kept being distracted by how flawless. We know that they're animated characters, but this was all done with practical effects, not visual effects. So they have like puppeteers carrying those trays with the
Oh yeah.
scotch on the rocks that the penguins are carrying, and there's that octopus bartender with like a mixer and like,
right.
or a cocktail shaker and shot glasses, and like they're actually holding those things in the air with little strings, or with like people under the stage who are puppeting that around. And it's beautiful the way everything's hand inked. Like we're not using computer animation back with this movie, so they bother to animate the reflections of all the characters on the floor, which I was noticing.
I didn't even notice.
When Donald Duck and Daffy Duck are playing on the piano, there's like the reflections of them on the floor, and Jessica's reflected off the floor when she enters, and just everything about it is just really well crafted. It's a beautiful scene.
So they deserve those Oscars. Thought it was good.
For the effects, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I thought that lived up. And to me, we're gonna have to talk about Herman at some point. Baby Herman. We're gonna have to talk about Herman. So I don't know if we want to skip there now, but
let's I want to take a moment to talk about our main character, who is not Roger Rabbit. It's Eddie Valiant.
That's true. Yeah, let's talk about Eddie Valiant.
We could talk the humans and then talk about the cartoons.
Yeah. No, that's good. Let's talk about Eddie.
So Eddie's introduction, which I think is great for him, even though it's like immediately switches the tone of the movie. He was standing on the side watching that 5 minutes of Roger Rabbit and Baby Herman doing their slapstick movie filming, and it just cuts to him, or it doesn't cut to him, but he's standing in the wings in the dark, and he's got his flask, and he just goes, "Toon."
Oh my God, there's
takes
so many
a big drag of I think he's drinking cheap whiskey on that scene. And he's not, this is where I start to think this is not a kid's movie, because he's your main character. He is not the kind of main character that a kid is going to relate to. He's depressed. He's got some sort of PTSD from his brother's death. He's
a little damaged.
He's got an alcohol problem, as you called out earlier. And yeah, he's just this moody, grumpy guy. And this is who's leading us through this whole adventure. And he's not a fun character at all. But I think, had they not marketed this as a kid's movie, I think he works really well. I think Bob Hoskins, occasionally his accent is a little bit off, but I think he's really good at being this grumpy detective character. You don't expect him to be fun, so it's like trying to make this really sour character evolve into something a little bit zanier for being able to hang out with Roger Rabbit and all of his friends by the end.
Yeah,
Um,
I thought he was good. Like, to me, he like kind of like almost made the mold of this like anti-hero detective that
yeah,
maybe I guess I could appreciate it more as an adult. But yeah, you're totally right. I totally don't remember relating to him at all as a
yeah,
kid. You know, I mean, he was like kind of just there. And I think like the whole like PTSD of like your brother being killed by a toon and I'm an alcoholic now and my life's in
mhm,
shambles like goes way over the heads of kids.
yeah,
But as an adult, I'm just like, okay, he's the anti-hero and this is kind of the mold of that, you know.
yeah. So you go through the first few scenes with him. He's taking the job. You see him. Actually, the one thing I think that humanizes him a little bit for kids is he's got that scene where he's trying to get on the trolley and he doesn't have any money, so he jumps. He waits
Oh
for it
yeah.
to pass and he jumps on the back with the rest of the like teenage kids, or they're not even teenagers; they're younger. And you see him pull that one kid who can't run fast enough to catch the trolley and help that kid on. I think that was a moment where it was like, all right, maybe he's not a bad guy. 'Cause leading up to that, it was just like, ugh, I don't like this guy at all.
Right. Like he's like the kind of guy that if you described him, you wouldn't want kids to go anywhere near him, you know? Right. But like,
Yeah,
yeah,
stay
he's
away from
definitely
that
humanized.
alcoholic detective.
I know. So much alcohol. So much
Hey,
alcohol.
so, fun question for you. Now, I know
Yeah.
how old you are, and you know how old I am because we were college roommates. But how old do you think Eddie Valiant is?
Oh, like how old was he when he made the movie?
I looked up how old Bob Hoskins was when he made the movie. How
Oh my
old do
God, I
you
have
think
no
this
idea. Oh my God.
character is?
I mean, I guess he looks like he's in his late 40s, his 40s.
He was 45 when he filmed this.
Oh, okay. I was
All
right.
right, here's a even better question. How old do you think Christopher Lloyd was playing Judge Doom? Like, how old is
Oh.
that character supposed to be?
Well, 1980. Oh, hello. Like 1988 was like right around like Back to the Future time.
Yep.
Uh, I have no
Also,
idea.
Robert
Like to
Zemeckis.
me, like Christopher Lloyd's always been like a wrinkly old man. I hate to
Yeah.
say that, but that's
No, he's
essentially.
just always
So I'm
been
like,
old.
I don't know, like 60. No, I don't know. I would put him older than yeah, like older
Ready?
than 45,
He was 49.
49.
But
Wow.
he looks, I mean, they've shaved his head and they have those like prosthetic teeth on him that look like dentures. And
Yeah.
like as a kid, I would have thought he was like 90.
Yeah, I mean, I think I did think he was like 90. And I think as a kid, I didn't realize he was the same guy from Back to the
From
Future.
Back to
Like,
the
I don't think I
Future.
put that together. I'm
Yeah.
not that smart, clearly. Um, yeah. So, yeah, we're skipping around a lot of the plot stuff, but one other thing I did like in terms of living up for me was as Eddie Valiant's taking the job and he's like super surly about it. So he's in RK Maroon's office. RK Maroon is, in charge of the whole toon operation, in charge of a studio. And he's like, we're over budget and blah, blah, blah. I kind of thought there was like fun touches in there that I think I probably must have liked as a kid, throwing peanuts out the window to Dumbo and makes a
Mhm.
reference that, Dumbo works for peanuts and things like that. And, as I think as a kid, you take those jokes at face value, but I thought it was kind of still funny. And,
Yeah.
you have these like little touches of like, a box falls over and like the animated instruments kind of start playing and run around. So, those were just fun things that like didn't come across as cheesy to me as an adult. I actually thought they were just as good. Um, all right, can we talk about Herman now? Are we ready?
Yeah. All
Or
right. You've been
I
dying
don't
to
know if
talk
we want to
about
go to
Baby
Patty
Herman.
Cake or Herman, but uh yeah,
Let's
Herman is
have
like
it. Baby Herman.
baby Herman to me is like a walking hashtag Me Too issue waiting to happen. Like, but I mean, there's a fair amount of cringe for Herman, but I can't say that I disliked him in the movie from a modern perspective. But yeah,
I think he's portraying a character type that, yeah. It's,
there's a lot of dumb broad throwaway lines there that
is there such thing as a misogynist with a heart of gold? Because I feel like that's
right, because he's sort of
that's
like
what he
on
is.
Roger Rabbit's side. I think that's what's sort of tough. He's like trying to get just for folks who don't remember, he's trying to get Eddie Valiant to take up the case for Roger Rabbit, and Eddie Valiant is super surly and doesn't want to. And this is before we find out that Roger Rabbit's hiding in his office. Yeah, so I guess he does have a heart of gold, but yeah, it was like a little cringe sometimes to me
Yeah.
for I think there was one line in there. I have, the 50-year-old lust and a 3-year-old dinky. And I'm
Yeah.
like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. I guess it's funny,
It,
but yeah. Um, yeah. So I think and then the only other thing that I wanted to point out that to me that did live up, and I guess we could point out what didn't, which like to me, like Herman's a little on the fence, is
yeah.
I feel like the whole slapstick of Roger Rabbit in Eddie Valiant's office, since Eddie Valiant is was formerly a toon savior, and
Mhm.
he's no longer anymore because as per our discussion about his trauma and alcoholism, um, I mean, all the slapstick of Roger being in his office, of the weasels coming in, of like them being, handcuffed
Mhm.
together by accident and dragged to Dolores's bar, still handcuffed. And like, I guess I was like on the fence of whether that still landed, but some of it was still funny, I
Mhm.
think. So what do you
I
think?
I still like that scene. We haven't really talked about Roger as a character
Oh
either.
yeah,
Since
we
he's the
haven't.
other, since he's the
Yeah,
title
the
character.
one that the movie's about, that one,
Um,
that Roger.
because the way he enters, like you do have these sort of funny bits, like the two of them both rolling over in bed at the same time and screaming and flying against the wall. And there's moments the way Roger walks around his office and kind of goes over things and fills in these backstory details, but in like a very subtle way. Like you see
Oh,
him
that's a good
picking up
point.
the pictures and um, you know, kind of just striking a nerve with Eddie. Like he, asks about his brother and hints at the alcoholism that we keep calling out.
Oh
Um,
yeah, the whole like when Roger was like, I tried to find you and I asked this person, that
oh, I
person, but the
love that. I
alcohol,
love that bit.
the liquor store guy, he
The
knew.
liquor store guy.
Yeah.
Oh, I that still held up for me, and that
Oh yeah,
since
that
I've
was
seen
funny.
it so many times, like that pops into my head every so often. Like I tried to find where your office was, so I asked the newsboy, and he didn't know. And like how he asked 100 people before the liquor
Yeah.
store guy knew where Eddie lived, and yeah, the cops are coming. Everyone knows where you are, Roger. Um, yeah, no, I thought that whole scene, I like it. And again, I think it's shot really well. Like you don't notice that the rabbit is not actually there. They're
Yeah.
using the puppetry again and moving different objects around. And Eddie's just kind of, or Bob Hoskins as the actor is just working through the space really well. So I do like that as kind of the pitting them against each other, but now they're stuck together kind of thing. And when you get the big reveal over at Dolores's that they didn't need to be doing any of that, like that still makes me laugh. That's very funny.
It still makes me laugh too in the line where so basically, Eddie Valiant, they're in this prohibition room in the bar because they're in hiding, and even though the whole bar is seeing Roger Rabbit walk in, because I guess like Toons could be celebrities, so I guess he's a celebrity. And Eddie Valiant gets out he gets out the saw and he's trying to saw off the handcuffs, and see Roger like just slyly slip out of the cuffs, like, oh, is this better? Is this
Does this
help?
help?
Yeah, does this help? And and then finally, I guess the big line is, oh, I could have done that at any time, but only when it
Not
was
at any
funny.
time, only when it's funny.
Oh
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, that's the line. The only when it was funny. And like I have to say that still lands to me.
Yeah.
And it was funny.
It was funny, but also it really gives you like this is how Roger's brain operates. Like he's gonna
Right.
go for the funniest option, even if it nearly gets him killed.
Right. And that's a total theme for the movie.
Yeah.
Like even when the judge comes in and knowing that Toons can't resist, like singing certain songs and making people laugh. It's definitely an undertone through the whole movie, which I think lives up to me more now. I probably didn't notice it as a kid, but
Mhm.
it definitely lives up to me more now.
So we mentioned Dolores really quickly. She's the bartender across the street from Eddie's place and love interest, although it's not quite clear from the beginning.
Right.
Um, it jumped out to me this viewing that her and Jessica Rabbit are really the ones doing all the work to solve the crime, and that the two of them are both like the cool, collected, but like the smartest characters in their own way. They don't get any of the credit, of course, because it's a old
Yeah.
war.
Let's give him the credit now, Amanda. Let's do
Okay.
it.
all right, Dolores and Jessica Rabbit are the smartest two characters in this entire movie, and they are the ones who solve the crime.
Yeah. Yeah. And for, because Dolores, she goes to probate and she figures out the whole scheme of like, she's the one that really puts it together as to like who's really pulling the strings. And it's like,
Yeah.
of course, like big bad corporation. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's the one who's hiding them. She's the one who
True.
goes and gets their clothes when they're on the run and shakes the weasels and,
Yeah.
finds them in the movie theater. That she's doing a lot of legwork for Eddie and very low reward, I would say, for her.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And yeah, I don't think I ever really like knew as a kid, nor do I really know as an adult. I'm like, are they on again, off again? Are they friends with benefits? I guess it doesn't really matter, but you're totally right. The point is that she really helps him.
Yeah. I think they are supposed to be. It is very confusing. But when she walks in and he's in his office and Jessica Rabbit's there, she gets very upset. And there's a bunch of dialogue around that. So I think they are sort of a thing.
Yeah.
But from the beginning, I guess right at the beginning, he's borrowed money from her. So there's
that's
like a lot
right.
of tension there as well, that she knows he's going to ruin her life.
And she's going to have to solve another one of his crimes.
Yep.
Yeah. But I guess she also serves to like kind of soften him up a bit. But
yeah.
I mean, I guess what I appreciate is that, I mean, it's not like this movie is that old, but she's for sure like a three-dimensional character.
Yeah.
And as is Jessica Rabbit. Like she's not just some arm candy or anything like that.
Yeah. Oh, Jessica's great because now we can talk about her as a character.
Yeah. Good transition.
Oh, smooth.
We're so good at this.
People. No, the way she has the most memorable entrance of any cartoon character, I think, ever.
Which still lives up in my opinion.
Yeah, lives up to my husband's opinion as well, apparently. No, but she's supposed to be the femme fatale, which normally in a noir movie, she's going to have some sort of criminal behavior. She's going to be in on the murder. She's going to be doing something really corrupt. And they keep teasing that she's doing that. You see her appear in certain places. She's running down the dark alleys. She's, hitting Roger Rabbit over the head with a frying pan in that one scene. And you suspect her most of the movie until you get to the very end. And spoiler alert, she didn't do it, but she figured out who did before anyone else did.
We haven't talked about what Roger's being framed for. Sorry, it just occurred to me because when you're saying that Roger didn't do it, it's that Roger killing Acme
for playing patty cake with his wife.
Exactly. So so you suspect Jessica Rabbit because she plays patty cake with Acme after her like very successful club performance. Then Acme shows up dead the next day because of all the pictures Eddie took, and then Roger Rabbit's the one on the run for that. So but you're right. Like I totally, even I have to say, rewatching it as an adult, I was like, wait, did she do it? Did Jessica Rabbit orchestrate this whole thing? Like,
you reminded me, one thing that does hold up for me is there's the scene where they call Roger in to say, hey, we have photos of your wife playing patty cake with Roger Acme. And he goes flying through these black and white photos, shuffling through them so quickly that they start to animate and you see them actually playing a game of patty cake. And that still makes me laugh. That's very clever.
I think so too. I actually, and that as I was watching that whole scene, I was remembering it as a kid and I remember thinking that was cool. I don't think that as a child, I understood the euphemism there, but as an adult, the patty cake euphemism
the sounds they're making when they're playing patty cake are very sexual. Oh, patty cake. What?
Yeah. No, I thought that Jessica Rabbit was a good character. Like I said, I think she, like, I was worried about it. But even that you were saying, like, even when the weasel reaches down her dress basically and gets the bear trap / booby trap, I mean, she's just standing there rolling her eyes. Like there's no damsel in distress situation going on. She's the one that helps solve the crime. She's like into her rabbit husband, I guess an early furry.
He makes her laugh.
He makes her laugh.
Yeah,
and I think the whole I'm not bad. I was just drawn that way. It's still a
Such an
good.
iconic line. Oh,
I mean, like, there's some like girl power in that.
yeah.
You know, I think
That
it's
always
good.
made me wonder, though, like, where are the toons coming from?
Like, who draws them?
Well, so is it like Walt Disney is sitting in an office creating beings? Like,
I think you just
did anybody
butthole,
animate?
Amanda.
I don't know. This is giving me some sort of existential crisis. Like, is there an overpopulation problem with the toons? Like, you just keep creating them, and they
And
seem
are
to
there
live
several
forever unless
versions of
you
one?
apply. There's very specific ways to kill a toon in this movie, but it
Yeah.
isn't very frequent. I have one more quick question for you, actually, though.
Yeah.
If you can remember back to when you saw this as a kid and that scene where they're telling Roger your wife was playing patty cake, he looks at the pictures, they give him a shot of alcohol and he goes berserk.
Berserk. Yeah.
And did that have any effect on? Because I know for me as a child, I thought, wow, alcohol's terrible.
You know,
Did you have any
clearly
memory of that?
I do, but I think that you're just like you were clearly a more sophisticated being at this age than I was. I had no memory of the promotion, and I think the alcohol registered, but it didn't register to me as like, oh, alcohol bad. I think I just thought it was funny.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that's actually made it's something like that lived up as an adult because I'm like, oh, that's like kind of hilarious that like basically a being that is geared towards children like literally cannot handle alcohol. It's like, and so I thought that was kind of like funny on a different level as an adult.
Yeah.
But I have no memory as a kid. I'm so disappointing. Yeah, don't remember. Like I guess I
It
remember
came
it, but I
out in
just don't.
1988. We were young.
We were young. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, we're gonna like age ourselves all through this podcast process.
Yeah.
Um, all right. So now, we've gone through some of these scenes. We're gonna go through some more in some other sections, but we're gonna rate or score on a scale of 1 to 10. So 1 is garbage, and 10 is Princess Bride, which is very good. In case someone's out there hasn't seen it. So on a scale of 1 to 10, does it live up to you as an adult? And I'd love to know what number you're thinking, Amanda, and why.
So I would give this an 8. I think it does live up, but I will add the context that as a child, I remember having high expectations for this movie and feeling like it was really dark and too grown up. So now as an adult, I'm the appropriate target audience finally. So that's where my 8 is coming from.
Yeah, I'm not too far off from you at all. So I started with thinking that it's at least above a 5 because there was enough there where I felt like more lived up than didn't live up. There wasn't that much cringe. It was still well done. So I marked it as a 7 for living up. So overall, yes. So, I marked it down a little bit for some cringe and I marked it down a little bit for too neat of an ending. But, and maybe the plot being slightly convoluted too. Still as an adult, I actually feel like sometimes I was like, wait, what is happening? Is Jessica good? So I left it as a 7, but I think we're pretty close. So that would be like a total of 15 out of a possible 20 that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good. All right. So that's living up as an adult. So we're not going to revisit the same scenes again, but now we're just going to take a look at the movie from the perspective of, and we're just going to try to imagine ourselves as the intended audience, which we kind of think was adult at the time, but whether kids like it. And so we're going to do that in this section. And I think I'll start by saying, like, obviously I watched it with my 5 and 10-year-old. And I'll just say right off the bat, my 5-year-old loved the slapstick part. The whole opening scene at the beginning, knives flying towards Roger Rabbit's head. My son thought the weasels were funny because they're just the weasels. If we didn't even talk about them, but they're not really 3-dimensional characters. They're just like the goons. They're toon goons for the judge who like walk around and like they're also idiots. So there's something slapstick and funny about that. However, I don't my 10-year-old daughter 100% noticed like what is up with the alcohol and was like, what is that?
Good for her.
Yeah, so much alcohol, and I don't think that that meant that it didn't live up to her. She just didn't relate. She didn't understand it. She was like, "Why is Eddie always like? Why does he always have like? Why is he always drinking?" It's a question, and I don't know if that speaks to whether kids are just more attuned these days, or I don't know.
Well, does she associate alcohol with a motif of depression? Because that's what it was
No.
being
Oh,
used
yeah,
for.
that's a good point. Yeah, that is I didn't even think about that. No, she doesn't, yeah, so it would be like, why, why all the bottles associated with this, like, moody grump face? Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, so the other thing I wanted to talk about, and I have questions for you for in terms of, like, living up for kids these days, is I kind of felt like there was a lot of old references. So there's references like Harvey the Rabbit. I mean, honestly, even Goofy and Dumbo. Do kids, do people even like associate with that? Have we canceled them? And even Betty Boop. Like these are characters that I think we had like a generational connection to that I just don't think that they do. So I don't know what you thought. I don't know if you were like, "Oh yeah, that was cool," or like what you think of that. But like I picked up on a lot of the old references that I would like smile and my wife would smile and my kids just like had no idea what was going on.
I mean, I think those characters are in there for people who have some knowledge of older cartoons, or the history of cartoons. And I think that's fine, especially since the movie's set in 1947. And there was a thought that popped into my head this viewing, actually. The penguins at the Ink and Paint Club who were serving all the tables
Yeah.
don't show up until Mary Poppins, which came out much later. Wasn't that like a 1960s movie?
Yeah, I think so.
Um, so in
Yep.
my head, then I made up this whole story like, well, at the time they would have been like unemployed actors and
Oh
they're
my God,
waiting
that's
for
a
their
great
break in
story.
Mary Poppins. But yeah, no, I think I'm not bothered by the historic cartoons that pop up in their cameos here. And they are
Yeah.
cameos, it's a Betty Boop cameo. Um, but there are references like talking about how great the public transportation is in LA. Like that's a wink nod kind of joke. Benny
Yeah.
the Tab's making jokes about the Brooklyn Dodgers baseball team and then they moved to LA. Like
That was a good one.
there's little things in there like that I think also are kind of fine and with the period. But it does, yeah, it kind of reminds me of, if you recall the movie The Wedding Singer with Adam Sandler, like they make jokes like, get out of my Van Halen t-shirt before the band breaks up. And like, that's a
Right,
reference to
right,
something that's going to happen at the time the movie's coming out and not
right.
contemporary of the movie. So
Yeah.
it
I,
has, it does take me out of it a little bit, but I don't think it's bad. Yeah,
yeah, I don't
it's
think it's bad. I
silly.
think it was just another level that I don't think, not just my kids, but like I just don't think that of a certain, if you're under a certain age, you probably won't get it, which might be still fine. But yeah, there's no way you're gonna know those jokes. Even at the very last scene when the piglet says, "Duh, duh, 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 that's all, folks."
Yeah.
Like I was like, I remember that as a kid watching it, thinking like, "Oh, cool. That's the pig," but I mean, I don't think a lot of kids like know that as like the ending for a lot of Looney Tunes. Um, so I kind of feel like just a lot of those little touches that added so
Mhm.
much texture to us just were not necessarily there for the kids.
Well, okay, let's talk about just the plot overall,
Oh my
because
God, that was my next question.
there's layers that just went right over my head as a kid that watching as an adult, I'm thinking, there's no way a kid is following the plot here. I mean, essentially, this is a movie about a really bad real estate transaction.
So
That's
that's
what
so
this is.
good. Wait, so Amanda, can you just like honestly like tell me the plot? Talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old. Because I have to say, like, even writing up my notes, I was like, wait a minute, I forget. I mean, I kind of know the basics, and I'm not really this dumb, listeners, but
All right.
yeah, just give a quick overview of the whole like murder plot.
I mean, I think if you went from the most shallow point of it, you would say you have Roger Rabbit, good guy, Eddie Valiant, whose last name is Screaming, good guy, but alcoholic. And you have Judge Doom, whose last name is Screaming, terrible, bad guy.
Right.
And the good guys have to beat the bad guys. That's, I think, the level that is available for younger viewers of this movie. Like, good guys are fighting a bad guy. That's all.
Right.
We don't know what they're fighting about, but there's good guys fighting a bad guy. Great.
Yeah, it got a little, I think, convoluted, and I don't think I cared as a kid. And I'm like, my kids certainly didn't care when we were watching. It's like the whole RK Maroon doing the fake setup with,
Yeah.
you know, so he could buy Toontown, and Cloverleaf really being the ones pulling, like you were saying, the shitty real estate deal, which is like
Yeah.
such an
And
amazing
the
way to put it.
reveal for all of this comes at that moment where Eddie Valiant has RK Maroon's tie in a projector.
Right.
Which as a kid, I thought, oh, I don't fully understand this machine, but oh, Eddie Valiant might kill this guy because he's winding his tie closer and closer with a projector.
Right. Yeah, you don't
It's
need to
really,
know it's a projector.
it's
Yeah.
just gonna shred the tie. Like, you're not.
No one's gonna die there. No one's gonna die by projector.
Nobody's dying in a projector in this movie until someone does. No, this movie is about a crazy cartoon who's disguised himself as a person who has somehow stolen enough money to make himself a judge, and now has the idea that he needs a large amount of real estate to build a highway, the first ever freeway in Los Angeles. And that is the backstory of this movie.
It is a hilarious real estate clusterfuck.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, we have this fake shell company called Cloverleaf, and they're buying up the public transportation, and they're buying up Toontown, and they're going to knock Toontown down and disable the public transportation. Like, this is, real infrastructure, nail biter. But all of this goes right over, they're talking about probate. They're talking about like contracts. They're talking about like wills and testaments. It's just,
I mean, kids don't know what any of that is. No one knows what any of that shit is.
jargon.
I don't even think I know what a probate is, but yeah, like just the concept of a will is like, I mean, one of my kids asked me what that is. And then I think it's funny that the will is just a single piece of paper, which like as an adult, is not really the case.
It's like one sentence long when they read it out loud.
I know, like, but yeah, no, so you started to describe the villain, Judge Doom. Let's talk about him in the context of this. So, Toon gone bad.
He's the reason you were scared of this movie, and me too.
Freaking terrified when I was a kid. Totally. And for those who forget,
from the 80s where they either combined animation over a person's face or stop motion animation, like in Pee-wee's Big Adventure with Large Marge, and her face goes all claymation. I mean, we used to forward through those scenes. It was so scary. And Judge Doom has that going on with his eyes.
Yeah.
And when he gets run over by the steamroller,
the roller,
peels himself up. Oh, that creepy laugh, and you want to forward right through that when you're a kid, but it's kind of funny now as an adult.
It is. I will say that one thing that lived up for kids for that one scene, like the reveal of Judge Doom as a toon at the end, like my kid, I mean, at age 5 and 10, they kind of got it. They were like, oh, but I think that there are other, and just for those who forget who he is, the Christopher Lloyd character, he is also the toon that killed Eddie Valiant's brother, although they never really connect those dots as to like, I think he's just like a sociopath. And he's the guy that's been pulling the strings the whole time. He totally has some sort of like bee in his bonnet over Toontown, and has this creepy thing called the dip that, the dip is what basically like erases or murders toons. It's the only way you can kill a toon. And the one scene that, I remember the dip being like scary as a kid, but as an adult now watching, and then like watching my kids watch it, like the scenes where he decides to demonstrate how the dip works, and he takes some innocent like toon shoes and sticks them in the dip, and the toon shoe. I mean, that is a long scene, and like the poor toon shoes are like, freaking out. Like you really feel like you're watching someone die. And I thought that was dark.
It's so dark. Yeah, no, there's definitely like a class, like second class citizenry going on with the toons, but there's also kind of these undercurrents of a genocide that's about to happen. There's dark stuff going on here, but I do want to add a random bit of trivia. the voice of that little shoe that got dipped, that's
Yeah.
Nancy Cartwright, who would go on to be Bart Simpson.
No.
Yeah.
Oh my God,
Doing the
that is
little
an
squeaky shoe
awesome
noises. That was probably one of
fact.
her earlier voiceover gigs.
If you don't remember anything else from this podcast, people, it's that it was a shitty real estate deal and that Bart Simpson got her big break for Roger Rabbit. Yeah, no, so I thought that was like a bit dark. I mean, like it's
Yeah.
I mean, kids are fine with dark, and I'm not like clutching my pearls over here, good Lord. But it was I thought it was like darker than it needed to be.
I mean, it makes the stakes raise so fast. Like now
Yeah.
that we know not only are they dying, but they are suffering and it's excruciating to watch. Like, oh no, we don't want to see anyone else get dipped ever again in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was effective. I mean, I think for kids and even just watching my own kids watch it, especially in the ending scenes where you realize there's like huge quantities of dip and he's going to ruin Toontown with it. And, Jessica Rabbit and Roger Rabbit are like strung up and about to get, dipped or whatever. It definitely adds to the tension. I mean, there's like, I did have a moment of thinking like, it's just sort of funny. It's just called dip. I mean, like there's something like a little funny about that. Yeah, so I just like I think he's like overall dark. I mean, Christopher Lloyd's awesome, and I think
He
that he
plays it so
landed.
straight too, and you know how funny Christopher Lloyd can be, but he is just so serious and so severe in every single scene, even when it's him doing the most ridiculous things. I mean, at the end when he's got that contraption with all of the dip in it's like James Bond villain silliness, like, and
It
it's
is very
great.
James Bond.
And we're
Yeah,
doing it at the Acme factory with all of these kooky toys around, and there's a merry-go-round, and just what is happening here?
yeah. I thought that the last bit of like I thought all of the slapstick was good into the last bit where Eddie Valiant decides to go to make the weasels laugh to death. Which
Mhm.
which was funny. I mean, I think
That is funny.
I should have mentioned in the last section. I thought that didn't quite live up to me as an adult, but I think for kids they seeing this grumpy man get out of his shell. The whole concept of the weasels, like this is how you're going to kill them, is to make them laugh really hard. For some reason, that like in a fucked up way resonate. I think could still resonate with kids. Even my son mentioned it to me the next day about it. So
Okay.
I think it's sort of there.
I was watching it and it made me uncomfortable as an adult, but it is the appropriate level of Bob Hoskins not being funny exactly. Like we've watched him try to get a sense of humor and clean up his act this entire movie, but he's clearly not comfortable being funny. And
Yeah,
I think that's where he really would be at that point. Like he's trying very hard to be funny and he's not comfortable and it's
yeah,
awkward, a little cringy, but like not in a bad way.
yeah,
So
yeah. But
I was okay with it because I thought it was appropriate, even though it's not very funny. Jess, right before we sat down to record this podcast, I asked you to ask your children what they thought the plot of this movie was. What did they say? I'm super curious.
yeah, I have to say, this is like not, I mean, this is focus group of like two. I mean, my son doesn't know what the hell's going on. He's 5. But no, my daughter like was basically like, I don't know. I mean, she had a hard time describing it because I think she was like, we talked about the characters and stuff, and then I asked her to just like, I was like, well, can you describe it in a couple sentences? And she's like, no. And maybe that's her being a teenager, but I think or she's not really a teenager now, but yeah, I think the plot was a little convoluted for her.
It's a lot of legalese and a lot of real estate
Yeah.
jargon.
And
Yeah.
then if you don't have the layers of references that you can pick up on, I think that like I think she had a hard time relating to Eddie Valiant in a way. I think she picked up on the alcohol stuff and was like, and maybe I didn't relate to him either as a kid. Maybe I would relate more to like Roger Rabbit or Jessica, any of those. And so like she's just I think there wasn't enough there for her. So like yeah, when I asked her about the plot, she's just like, I don't know how to describe it. It's basically like a non-answer, but that's the
Yeah.
answer I got.
No, I think that's fair.
the only other thing, and I think we've covered this before, is just the general and the slapstick antics in the office and stuff, which I think was really good. I don't think it's standout for kids these days or teenagers these days. I just, and we could appreciate the craft as adults, but I'm not sure that it's it's a unique story, we'll say, but like I don't think like the idea of tunes coexisting is something that would be like that compelling.
Yeah, no, I see that as like a bit almost the way, a Saturday Night Live skit will have a bit, but you don't run it for more than 5 minutes unless you have something profound to add on that. And this is a noir movie with a bit.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to say it. So anyway, so shall we score this one?
Sure. So this
All
is
right.
from present day kids' point of view. Does this live up?
Yeah. So on
You want to go
again,
first this time?
yeah, I can go first. So again, the scale same as last time, is scale of 1 to 10. So 1 being garbage, ten being Princess Bride. Um, does it live up to kids now, the intended audience? And I'd say I'm gonna say the words. I don't think it does, but I'll give it some points. So I scored this a 2. I
Ooh.
think there's enough slapstick for younger kids, um, but I think there's too much older references that I don't think that the texture of it really lands. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to go as low as a 2, but I'm going to give it a 5. I
5. Yeah.
remember as a kid
Oh,
in the
difference.
80s
Yeah.
that I enjoyed watching this, but I did not understand what was going on. And I thought it was going to be a lot funnier than it was. After those first 5 minutes, it just got very dark and moody. And I think kids today would probably have the same reaction. So, and as your
I also
daughter said,
wondered,
what's the plot? No.
right. And I
Nope.
also wonder just the idea of an anti-hero. Like, I think that that is so, it's like, I think that that is a more common character nowadays, is the
Mm,
anti-hero. And I'm not sure that that makes it like unique, but I think it made it great, maybe for like our generation, or even watching it as again as an adult. But I don't think that that's like a unique concept for kids these
yeah.
days.
And I think you're right that just from a kid's point of view, there isn't a character that you can latch onto as this is the character that I'm seeing this world through their view. You don't get
Yeah.
close enough to Roger to feel like he's the one guiding you through this movie. And it's coming a lot from Eddie Valiant, who is just not something, he's not somebody kids would admire or think is funny or want to be like, or, he's just not a good tour guide in this world.
Yeah. Well, that's a good transition, because I think jury's still out whether we need this next section, but I think, do we find something new to like or relate to about it? So, I think that's what's sort of fun sometimes with rewatching these movies, is that you could pick up something that's you didn't the first time, or just appreciate it in a new way. And I think Eddie Valiant is like in the category for me, where I did appreciate him in a new way as the like moody anti-hero. And whereas like I don't think I thought anything of him as a kid, but I kind of wanted to root for him more as an adult rewatching it.
I appreciated Eddie Valiant's trauma and backstory. Like, I was noticing the details about him. Like, there was some photo in his office of his brother and him were circus kids, that they came
Yeah.
out of the circus, and I never noticed that detail before. That was Teddy and Eddie, the two kind
Oh
of
yeah.
clownish. They were at
Yeah.
Barnum and Bailey's circus, I guess, before they became detectives.
Yeah.
So like little details like that where you got this feeling of like how much he really had lost, which as a kid you don't even want to be processing that, but as an
Right.
adult, that hits a little bit harder.
I actually think so I know we mentioned this before, but I think the concept of patty cake as a euphemism, to me, just like it, I thought that was so funny and brilliant. Whereas like I don't think I thought anything of it as a kid, but now it was definitely a new thing I could appreciate about it, about the movie, like how the wink and nod there was just really good. I think just the idea of patty cake, because it's so innocent and dumb, but you kind of know what they mean,
Yeah.
you
Oh
know.
yeah. Another thing that I noticed, and this is more because I've since childhood been studying how to screenwrite and have been studying film and different aspects of the craft. They're very good at putting in subtle things in the beginning that reappear in the end. The die laughing is the most obvious one that shows up about halfway through the movie, that Judge Doom is yelling at the weasels like, "You're gonna die laughing if you
Oh
don't shut
yeah.
up." And then you see that happen at the end. But there's a very subtle rivalry going on with Roger Rabbit and Goofy that I picked up on this time.
Oh yeah. Oh, you're
That
totally right. I didn't pick up on that as a kid.
and that gives Roger a little bit more character to me because he's got a competitor that he's both admiring, but then at the end, Jessica's reassuring him like, "No, you are better than Goofy," and you see him just like needing that validation. So I thought those little details are very funny, but also added a lot to the character in a way I hadn't noticed before.
Yeah, I picked up on that too, the Goofy reference or the reference of like that subtle kind of, I guess male rivalry there between, I mean, are they men? I don't know. Between Goofy and Roger Rabbit and having Jessica Rabbit as her. Yeah, I totally picked up on that and thought that that was kind of fun. I also thought, like you mentioned this earlier, but the whole send up of the idea of like, there's no traffic in LA. Who would go on this godforsaken freeway? And it's like hilarious because I haven't spent a ton of time in LA, but I've certainly been there enough to know that it's like a highway hellscape. So
Gridlock.
So, just the whole funny thing of like who would drive on a freeway and they're talking about Los Angeles is pretty funny. And I definitely picked up on that. Like the whole, like you were saying, it's a shitty real estate deal and basically pending shitty city planning.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like just some of the smaller things, like I thought even at the club scene at the beginning, like with the penguins, I totally, this is such a small thing, but I actually laughed out loud watching this again when Eddie Valiant is yelling at the penguin he orders a scotch on the rocks and he's like, and I mean ice. And, and then of course he gets his drink and it's like scotch with like a literal rock. And I think as a kid, I thought that was funny, but, and my kids both laughed at that too, but I actually laughed out loud at that as someone who actually does enjoy her bourbon on the rocks myself as an adult. And I'm like, that's kind of like those little touches I appreciate it as an adult that go just so over the head of kids that, I thought that was kind of fun. I actually really like the 40s nostalgia. I thought that was like, I didn't appreciate that as a kid, but I thought that was really well done. And
you know what I love this time? Dolores's outfits. She has some fantastic clothes.
She's
I never
really
noticed that
too.
before. Her wardrobe was just killer, and she's working in that terrible dive bar, but she looks fantastic.
She does look fantastic. She looks like the Technicolor version of every grainy but yet amazing glamour shot of everybody's grandma you've ever seen, like from like the 40s. Like, that is personified in Dolores's character. You're totally right. Yeah, her hair is perfect. Her outfits are good. Yeah.
We should give her a shout out too. So that actress is Joanna Cassidy, and she was in Blade Runner right before this.
Oh,
well, not right before, but a few years before this. So
interesting.
She's just a solid actress in this. I mean, I thought she was a great character.
Great character. I'm glad that you have done your research because I was wondering, I was like, oh, what has she been in? Because I thought she was great in this. One other thing that I wanted to say that lived up for, or just like I found new to like about it, is that the cab driver cartoon.
Oh, Benny the Cab, yes.
Benny the Cab. I always thought he was funny as a kid, and certainly my youngest, my son thought he was funny. The cab that drives around. But as an adult, I was like, it's kind of funny. Like I actually found a new appreciation for it in a weird way.
Yeah, I don't know. I did enjoy that car chase scene that they do with the cops.
Yeah,
I thought that lived up.
Yeah, and he's just like, move over, I'm gonna drive. Like he's also sort of like old and cranky, and then you have a cab driving a car, and like he makes those jokes about the Brooklyn Dodgers being bums, and it's I feel like it was like that character is actually more geared towards adults, and I appreciated it.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that we've talked about living up as adults, we've talked about whether it could live up to kids. They talked about the new things about it that we found. So I think it's a final yay or nay. So just the scoring so far. So in terms of living up as adults, we scored it. Who Framed Roger Rabbit got a total of 15 out of 20. For whether it lives up to kids or the intended audience, got a total of 7 out of 20. So now that is a total of 22 combined score. So a 22 out of 40. So somewhat middle of the road there. But I think that the final yay or nay is it doesn't have to be a high score. It doesn't have to be a low score. I mean, I think there are some things that don't live up, but you could still like. So I guess what would be helpful is that I'm going to go through my definition of what lives up, and I'd love to hear yours. And then I think we do need I think the decision needs to be unanimous for it to live up.
Okay.
But so for me, my definition is that I think it's something that you still enjoy, something that you want to watch again, regardless of like any cringe factor or regardless of whether kids like it. So that's sort of my bar there. Like, do you just want to watch this movie again? And so for me, to me, Who Framed Roger Rabbit does live up to me, even though I graded it pretty harshly. I gave it a 2 for living up for kids, and I gave it a lower score 2 for living up for adults than you did. So,
well, consensus on how we're defining whether it lives up. I agree. I would want to watch this again. It would probably be my 200th time. But even as an adult, I still find parts of it really charming and witty and heartfelt. And it definitely went over my head as a kid. So there was more to discover as an adult. And if you haven't watched this yourself in a little while, maybe give it another view, because you'll be finding new jokes that didn't make any sense at all when you were a kid. So
no sense.
Yeah. I think it lives up.
Yeah.
I think it lives up.
And I mean ice. Yeah, I think actually that's a good way to kind of think about it, is that, like, would you recommend people see it again? And so I would say, yeah, go. You definitely watch this again. If you haven't watched it in a long time, you'll definitely find something to like about it. So let's congratulate Who Framed Roger Rabbit. You lived up.
Oh,
yay.
Roger's so relieved.
So relieved. Everyone involved.
He and Jessica are eating carrot cake and celebrating somewhere.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. So maybe you didn't agree with our assessment. We'd love to hear, any feedback on scoring. So you could find us on Twitter and Instagram at liveuppod, or you can shoot us a note at liveuppod@gmail.com. I am curious whether people, if people have other scenes that they felt whether they lived up or not. And yeah, well, we could end on that.
All right. Well, from Live Up, this is Amanda Treat.
This is Jess Latterman.
Thank you. Until next time.